Hi everybody, this is Pastor Joshua Sullivan, pastor of Holy Cross Lutheran Church of Kerrville, Texas. Welcome back to ATP Ask the Pastor. Today we've got a question from Russia. Someone writes, Dear Pastor Sullivan, greetings from Russia. I hope you're doing well. I have a question for you. Perhaps a topic for the next ATP episode. Here it is. Why have the Lutherans retained the corrupt Romish version of the Decalogue, where the second commandment is deleted while the 10th divided into two? I have only just discovered it in the Book of Concord, to my bewilderment, after being a Lutheran for 7 years. First of all, thanks for watching all the way over in Russia. It's good to have you with us. I think as we look at this question, I think there are two ways of going about it. Two things that need to be said. The first is, we have to remember that the Lutheran Reformation is, first and foremost, a conservative Reformation. Any sort of a Reformation that does not want to conserve good things from the past is automatically a revolution. So part of this is that Luther wanted to conserve what he had received. And the Western Church, to the best of my knowledge, has always ordered the commandments, like Luther has it in his small catechism, where the second commandment is, thou shalt not misuse the name of the Lord thy God, or take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, however you want to translate that. Now, so there's that aspect of it, of that would have been what he learned, that would have been what his people had learned, that would have been what the Western Church had used for ages. And so for Luther, there was really no reason to change it, and it would have caused a bunch of confusion. Now, there's something else, though. There's another way of looking at this, and that is the Ten Commandments aren't really ordered in Exodus chapter 20. In fact, there's two things that are kind of happening at the same time here. The first is Exodus 34:28. If you read that, it says, So he, Moses, was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the Ten Commandments. So in Deuteronomy 34:28, Moses specifically calls them the Ten Commandments. He also does this in Deuteronomy 4:13, where he calls them the two tablets of stone that are written, the Ten Commandments. So that's there. There's 10 of them. However, if you go to Exodus chapter 20 and count the number of imperative verb forms, I think you'll find 12 or 13. So there is a little bit of leeway in how you get to 10, or how you number the 10. This isn't some legalistic thing of the Lord said this is the second one, or this is the 9th and 10th one, something like that. There's something going on here too then with the definition of idolatry. Whereas the Reformed and the Eastern Orthodox, who take this commandment number 2 being thou shalt not make any graven images, they retain that. The Western Church puts that underneath the first commandment. For the Western Church, that is part of, or one of the ways in which you may have another god by having an idol. But really, the way Scripture talks about idolatry is not a matter of having a golden calf or worshiping a statue of Baal, but is of what you worship in your heart. That is where your fear, your love, and your trust go. So you don't necessarily need a graven image to do that. In fact, we get that from Ezekiel chapter 14, verses 3 and 4. There, the Lord tells Ezekiel that in the exile, all of these elders and all of these men have taken their idols into their hearts. So they no longer worship wood and stone and gold and silver and all that, but they make themselves idols. They still have the same false gods and the same false notions about the true God. It's just not visibly evident. So in the Lutheran Church, we view idolatry not so much as are you worshiping at a pagan altar. That is most certainly true. That is most certainly idolatry. But more so, we see idolatry as a matter of the heart. Who do you fear above all things? What do you love above all things? What do you trust for every good thing in this life? You mentioned the Book of Concord. If you read the large catechism on the first commandment, I think this will clear a lot of this up and give you Luther, and thus a lot of Augustine in this as well, their way of thinking about idolatry is it's chiefly a matter of the heart. Fear, love, and trust. Now, another aspect of that, I know we keep saying another aspect and another aspect of it, but there's a lot to this. Another aspect of this is that Luther argued in, and I forget where it is off the top of my head, his writing against Karlstadt. I forget what it is off the top of my head. Against the Heavenly Prophets. There you go. In Against the Heavenly Prophets, he argues that the prohibition against graven images is ultimately a part of the ceremonial law, much like he will do in the same document and other documents where he's arguing against the Sabbatarians, those who say you have to worship on Saturday because of the third commandment says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In both of these commands, even though they are part of the Ten Commandments, Luther sees them as ceremonial law because they deal with ceremony. They deal with the when, where, how, posture, in what manner. Anything that tells you how or in what manner you are to worship is part of the ceremonial law and is therefore abrogated by Christ. So just as the Sabbath is abrogated by Christ, and so Paul is able to say in Colossians chapter 2, that we shouldn't let others judge us based on what day we worship, whether we keep new moons and festivals and the Sabbath, etc. So it is also with graven images, because that is a thing directed to Old Testament Israel so that they don't look like their neighbors. Now, what this means then, again, this reinforces the idea that the outward extent of idolatry is not the only extent of it. Again, I go back to that question of how many people do you know, or do any of us know, that have statues of golden calves or worship actual graven images. And in our day and age, I'd say, relatively few. Although, at least in North America, paganism is having quite a revival and is at the beginning of its comeback. So in all of this, we see idolatry as a matter, first and foremost, of the heart, not so much of the image. Now, it's interestingly enough, we brought up against the heavenly prophets, and Luther's writing there. Luther's writing against Karlstadt on this issue actually came up because Karlstadt was an iconoclast. He wanted to get rid of statuary in the churches. He wanted to get rid of crucifixes. And Luther actually defends the use of statuary in churches, stained glass windows, wood carvings, and primarily crucifixes because of what he does with the second commandment then. He says it's for the Jews, the graven images commandment is for the Jews, it's ceremonial, and besides then, we're also not worshiping the crucifix. We're not worshiping the statuary. We're not worshiping the stained glass. All of these things are multi-sensory ways of preaching, of multi-sensory ways of getting the gospel into people's eyes and therefore into their hearts by seeing these sorts of things. I mean, think about the crucifix. An empty cross, you can do anything you want to with an empty cross. Madonna can wear an empty cross. Pop stars who have they don't even have a smidgen of the Christian faith, they can wear crosses because you can cram any idea you want to in a cross. But a crucifix can only mean one thing because you've got a guy, the Son of God, dying there upon the cross. So that's why Luther defended the crucifix so vehemently, and this is how he defended it, by saying this commandment is ceremonial law, just like the commandment to keep the Sabbath day. So in this, what it means is obviously we still don't worship the crucifix, we still don't worship our statues, our stained glasses, our icons, anything like this. Ultimately, what it means is there is this spiritual aspect of the commandment, which is really the same as the first commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods. Thou shalt fear, love, and trust the true God above all things and for every good thing in this life. That's ultimately why Luther kept this. A, because of the conservative nature of his Reformation, but also B, because this commandment is ceremonial law, because it tells us the manner in which we are or are not to worship, when the worship of the New Testament is faith in Christ. So there's a lot in there, but that's ultimately why Lutherans keep the Western way of doing that. Now, ultimately, if it comes down to it, if folks say they want to keep the other ordering, that's fine. It's one of those things where we're not going to split hairs over it. The important thing is that we understand what true idolatry is. True idolatry is a matter of the heart. And just because you go to church on Sunday, just because you worship the triune God, doesn't mean that you are free from idolatry. Because again, idolatry is chiefly a matter of what do you fear above all things, what do you trust for every good thing, and what do you love more than anything else at all times in this life. And that's where our real idols creep into our hearts then. Thank you for the question. That's a very thoughtful question, and one that a lot of folks, at least in North America, have as they're coming out of generic Protestantism and evangelicalism into the Lutheran faith. In fact, in my adult instruction, I usually spend a little bit of time covering just this sort of thing, and I'm mapping it all out. Because if you've come from the generic Protestant background, this can very much be a trip up. But that's how we deal with it anyway. Thank you for your question. Thank you for watching all the way from Russia. We appreciate you viewing. We also appreciate everybody out there watching, sharing the videos, subscribing to us on YouTube. Appreciate it very, very much. If you've got something that you would like to ask the pastor, shoot me an email, atpholycross@gmail.com, atpholycross@gmail.com, and I will do my best to answer it as soon as I am able. We'll see you next time.